So, after the last episode in which we got together in the studio to have nice, relaxed, and very tangential at times, candid conversation, we figured why not have part two
in my studio,
in Jackie's studio, surrounded by her beautiful art and art products as well. Making a light over here. For those of you that can see it on YouTube. And if you're listening, this is your imagination. But
yes.
Anyways, we figured we'd make another one of these special episodes where we're just sitting with you. It's almost like you're sitting here with us. We're talking all things, art business, art life, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. So this is the first time you're seeing, I actually changed the display of my art products, which is something that I was so excited about. That was like my win for this week and my reward to myself for finishing this series that will be going in an exhibition. But it really got me thinking about like creative spaces, which I know you and I talk about all the time, in terms of like how our spaces influence the work that we make. And I think especially, I just moved into the studio in July, so about 2 months ago, after having a studio in art space for a full year before that, realizing like how a creative space shifts the work that you make. Have you found that too? Especially moving into your studio last year, like how did you feel like that shifted your creative process?
For mine, I think one of it was the more obvious element of it is going bigger.
Yeah.
Having a bigger space, it's almost like the whole, I'm trying to think of what animal does this. Anyways, there's several marine animals that do this. The bigger the tank, the bigger they get.
Yeah, like a goldfish.
Like,
oh my goodness,
let's
did
go
you
to
see
goldfish.
that? Kind of off topic, but relatively on topic. Did you see that article about a goldfish that was like let loose in a pond and it grew to be like gigantic? Like feet by feet wide.
Hold on. No. True story.
Oh no.
Over at Fantasy Lake Scuba Park, I got to see it with me own eyes. They do have a gigantic goldfish.
Stop.
This thing, I wish I was kidding. This thing is like probably this freaking big, and it looks glorious underwater. Like you think of a goldfish and you're like, oh, I don't know. They're not necessarily cute.
It's like, that's there.
Yeah, so it's either a goldfish or a koi, proper koi. Could have this wrong. Fish people don't hate us for this.
We're not fish experts.
We're not fish experts. But this thing, it's the sort you would have in a little tank in your house. And this thing's like 3 feet.
That's insane.
I mean, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
And that's like literally what we're doing with our artwork in our new spaces.
Kinda. It's like the bigger the space, the bigger, potentially. Now that, mind you, not everybody has to go bigger.
Right.
There's this drive with a lot of artists, at least painters, where it's like, I want to go bigger, bigger, bigger. I think it's almost, would we call it an ego thing in a way? Kind of like, maybe ego's not the right word. Maybe like that whole, I want to see if I can kind of feeling. And then once you do it, then you decide.
Yeah, and I think I'm definitely in that headspace now. In my old studio, which was like a third of the size of my current one. You guys on YouTube are just seeing like a small corner of it. But it's basically like the third, my old studio was a third of the size of my current one. And I was starting to make pieces, like when I was working in my apartment, the biggest I had worked was like a foot by a foot. And like, I think I had done maybe a 2-foot painting, and that felt like huge at the time.
Technically, you could have gone bigger and just put them in the dining room.
Right. And it got to the point of like, there's like the storage aspect that you have to think of, like the inventory of, okay, like how many paintings can you make and store at one time, plus all of your materials and all of your supplies, and try not to get like too carried away in the space I was living, even though I definitely did. But then moving to a public facing studio, which is so nice, being able to have everything in one place. But that space goes pretty quickly when you account for like tables and packaging material and panels that you haven't painted on yet and inventory.
And on yours, you had, and I know you still do, your stations. Each station needs its own space, like admin space, packing space, working space, planning space.
Yeah, and yours is a little bit more fluid, but I'm very much the type where it's like I need to segment parts of my life. So like when I'm doing this, I am fully present doing that. Otherwise, in the past, I've tried to super multitask or do multiple things in the same area, and it just like doesn't, it's like an error code in my brain. It's like I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. yesterday I was doing this at this table, but now I'm doing this other thing. So I need like, okay, if I'm at this station, I'm working on admin. And if at this desk, I'm like, no technology is allowed. I'm like drawing, sketching, ideating. If I'm at this table, like I'm actively painting.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm a little different on that.
Yeah, you like have
I'm
like your laptop on your lap, painting like palette on the right side, like your camera's photographing stuff over here. And I'm just like,
no, it actually
this is chaos, but it makes so much sense to you.
It is for me because I'm like, it makes it, okay, the way my space set up, you know, maybe in a different space, it'll be different.
Right.
Stations, but the way my space is currently set up, there are a lot of things I'll take out. But then when it's time to go, or my studio mate is coming, or there's a like public event, whatnot, I have to put things away. So when I take it out, I'm like, I don't want to have to take out to put away to then bring out something else to then put away to bring out to. Like if I could just leave it out, it's different, but I can't.
That makes sense.
Not the way my space is right now. So for me, I'm like, I'm more of a no. Put all the things that I'm going to work on or plan to work on, hope to work on. And then I go from station to station. So like, let's say I do a layer of paint and I'm waiting for that to dry.
Yeah.
Then I can work on the computer. Oh, you know, my eyes are bothering me. I've been on it too long. I can switch on and do something else. Oh, I'm going to frame these cards, you know, whatever, or art product. Or have the Cricut going, which more on that later, you know. So essentially, it's a multi-station. It's an all-things station.
Within like a smaller space. I think that makes sense too, even back when.
Yeah, because think about it. Even though the way my studio is, it's segmented into a work area and display area.
Right.
When I'm in that work mode, I actually put it all in one space, which is the previous video. If y'all saw it, all the things were in the same area.
Right.
So it's almost like making a smaller triangle of stations, kind of like kitchens.
Yeah.
It's just
like one counter to the next counter.
Exactly.
You go from like sauteing to chopping to like prepping.
But it's almost like it's all in the kitchen island.
Yeah.
As opposed to going around. Like yours is more like, you know, ping pong stations over here.
Right.
Mine's like imagine once more giant thing and it's all happening.
Yeah. And I think that does it is influenced too, like by the way your studio is laid out. Like well, one, you are sharing a space. So it's like already segmented, but then also there is a wall in the middle, so it's like the back side is more like storage or admin and all your materials, and the front is more display and work area, versus mine, it's like completely open. There is a back section that has like my desk and then like sink and refrigerator and stuff, but really from the workspace area, it's really open, which if you guys are listening to this or watching it on YouTube, if you go to my Instagram at jsanders_studio, I always post a bunch of pictures like of my space to try to bring you guys into it, so you might know what we're talking about if you look at those.
There's another aspect to your question, another part to your answer. So not just big and not just affecting the way our workstations are set up. Right? That station. But I think the other way that it actually has done, in a very good way, it has helped me cohesify my style.
Because you can see everything at one time.
So at my old space at home, I mean, I guess the best I could do was like line up things on the hallway.
Right.
But the lighting wasn't that great anyway. So like it just comes with challenges. So a lot of times you start making onesies. Yeah. And they should look similar. And then you put them together and you're like, they don't quite flow the same.
Right. You're like, you have the end points, but you don't have that middle progression per se. When like if you're in even the space to like batch create pieces, okay, I'm gonna work on these 6 all at the same time, like we talked about when we were in your studio, it inherently becomes more cohesive because you can work on them at the same time.
Yeah.
And so you can also see like works that you've made in the past. Okay, I want to incorporate this detail from this and this concept from here. What happens if like these 2 paintings were to make a painting, and then let's focus on that.
Exactly. Or how do they look next to each other? Do they talk to each other? Are they still related? So yesterday, you know, I was supposed to go home, and instead, what did I do? I wrote out 4 paintings that are unfinished, that are this close to done. And then I put them on the floor in front of the 3 I had just finished, in front of the 3 big ones, and near the smaller hexagon ones I was working on. Mm-hmm. So suddenly in my working / display area, I have 15 paintings out at once.
Yeah, girl.
And I was like, those 4 that had been unfinished for a few months. Yes. Suddenly I had this clarity of like, I know what to do. I can tie them in together. So being able to have not just the storage, but also like just the wider space, the open space, where I can look at the whole series almost together, not completely, but almost together, it changes things. Then you're like, oh, okay, I know how to make this more cohesive with what I've already made without making any major changes. In my case, it was just colors. I just had to tweak some of the colors I use.
Interesting. And that's, I feel like I've gone through that very recently as well, which is like with this series, if you're on YouTube, you can see behind us, and there's a few more in this studio, but that actually ties in perfectly with something that I've been thinking a lot about recently, because there was a series I made about 5 years ago for my senior exhibition. Adriana, you can see them here.
They're really cool.
But it was one of those, I felt so connected to these pieces when I made them, and it was 2015. After college, which I've shared on the podcast before, I just had like a crazy burnout, like didn't make artwork for 2 years type of burnout. And so when I came back to the creative process of like trying to like, who am I as an artist? What do I want to make? What does this like new phase of creation look like? I tried to visit that series again, and I just did not feel connected to it at all. Like the style, nothing. And so I kind of like took a few steps back and started doing abstract backgrounds with then overlaying geometric shapes on time, very crisp, keeping lines simple and white, which conceptually really connected with me a lot at the time. But I've always come back to those pieces. And I feel as though the series I've just been able to like relaunch is almost like an iteration of the new series I began, the Beauty and the Breaking series, 2 years ago. It's like an iteration of that, but it almost feels like a bridge between my old series and new series. Exactly. Like if you were to like put them in a timeline, it's almost like this is the transition into what my new style has become, but instead I'm like working backwards.
Yeah, but you can actually see it. It's like they're sitting here in the studio, and I wish we could show you, but they're too big to kind of like put in front of us. They actually look like, if you didn't say how old they were, they look like they fit with your current style. Like, yes, there's slight differences in the way it's executed, but the colors that you're using, your geometric lines and the textures of the like layering behind them and everything else, it's like, other than the light component, which is different, and you guys will have to see that on Instagram when she posts
the light sculptures,
which is really cool. I'm like, outside of that, well, even that ties in, because you're still using like a plexi type material that you've used on some of your work before,
the light and shadow.
Yeah, so it's like they actually look like what you do now in a way. So if they're sitting next to each other, they don't stand out like, oh, that's old stuff.
Right, which I think is
like at all.
Which I think is really interesting too, of getting that removed perspective on like someone's work, which like we were talking about in your studio, I think shows so much like the value of getting outside feedback, especially when it comes to the pricing conversation, which is a whole different thing, where it's like, just because it feels like, oh, this is an older piece, maybe I shouldn't price it as high, versus like, people, when they come into your studio, they don't know that. They don't have the history. And I think from an art making standpoint and like the concepts behind it, just like with your scenario where like, okay, I have these 3 or 4 paintings. I made them a few months ago. They might be like 80% there, but I don't know what the answer is to get them to 100. Where it's, you might take 3-4 months to figure out what that missing piece is. And they sit there and just are like staring at you. But you have to almost go through these other paintings in order to know how to finish the old ones.
That's exactly right.
Which I think is a big lesson to learn.
Yeah, and that ties into what we were talking yesterday about making 100 good paintings or 100 bad paintings to get to a good one. It ties back into that. It's like, as you go through the process of making them, even the crappy ones can still teach you lessons on how to fix the good ones. That are sitting there unfinished and you're wondering how to fix them. You can find solutions. It's almost like your brain is troubleshooting. Just part of what I love about the art making process. You know, speak about demystifying it, right? You know, there's this pervasive kind of like common thought out there, and I keep hearing it time and time again, that people think like, that this is not cerebral at all. It actually
So
is.
much. Yeah.
Even if we go full intuitive, but we're just having fun and expressing our feelings and whatnot, there's also a lot of analytical bits to it. Where we're like, does it tie in? How about this? How about that? How about texture? How about the context? Even the stories, so they match each other.
Right.
It's literally like crafting a book, you know? It's like, do the characters like resonate with each other? Do they gel together? Do they connect? It's not just, oh, I just did this spring thing and that's the end of it.
Right.
Which, like, if it's just a hobby, that's fine. You know, you're good. Like, who cares? But if you're trying to make you know, what you make your income from, you know, you're trying to make a living out of it, there's so much more that goes into it. As a business owner, you have to make that decision. Going back to my pastry example, we're just going to if yours is a pastry shop, you don't also sell pizza.
Right.
You don't also sell hamburgers. I mean, if you're a proper pastry shop, you don't go, you still have a lot of freedom within the things that you do.
Right.
But you still stay within certain bounds. And it's like, that's the part where, from an analytical standpoint, it's something we have to do. And that's something you've done. Because you could be here painting flowers with geometric aspects to them. Or landscapes.
Which again is like, that could be a style for someone else. And like, if someone critiqued my work, like, oh, you should make flowers out of these shapes.
You should add a bird to this thing.
Right. We're like, I could, but
does it call to you? Does it attract you?
Right. And I think that's one, like, a huge hurdle for a lot of emerging artists, which again, I think there's always that conversation of like, is art school worth it? And that's a way larger conversation. But I think the huge benefit of art school is that it fast tracks by necessity, because they're your assignments in classes. It fast tracks that exploration process, and it automatically exposes you to so many different mediums, so many different styles. And so it speeds up that process of figuring out what you connect with, what medium do you feel compelled to, because in one semester, you might be taking a watercolor class and then an abstract painting class and then a sketching class, and like, you're exposed to them all at one time, and then you are able to pick and choose from there. But I think in order to find that style, and I think that's one thing that so many, especially going from a hobby artist to emerging and more established, it truly is as like simple as it is, like just making more artwork. Like, you can't overthink it. You can only learn by the process of doing it, and by like getting those touches on like making 100 paintings.
Exactly.
Nothing can like out research like the actual process of making it.
Correct. And for some people, they may try one medium and they fall immediately in love.
Right.
I know a few watercolorists that have not touched acrylics, oils, coloring pencils, nothing.
Yeah.
They literally tried watercolors first, which is such a fun medium to work with.
Right.
Fell in love immediately, mastered it. They don't want to move, and that is totally fine. But my advice would be for those of you that are self-taught, which misnomer, if you think about it, we're all self-taught.
I was gonna say, I was like, well, everyone, like, you, because the creative process is so much about you and your experiences and what you bring to a table.
Exactly.
Yes, you
still
can learn
have to do the painting part and teach yourself.
Right. Like, yes, you can learn specific techniques from classes or like specific watercolor washes.
Exactly.
But again, yeah, I think that's that larger conversation of like, especially this day and age with like YouTube and like online courses and like art, like creative memberships online. We're like, okay, I'm going to take a 6-week course on watercolor from this person, and it's all online classes.
All focused,
So like, there's so much, and that's such a gray area, especially now with so many universities going virtual.
Exactly.
Where it's like, what's the difference between that and paying $40,000 a year to go to this university?
If the college gives you the access to someone that's a master of their medium, that doesn't mean those same masters also teach independently. Right. Don't go through the red tape and can teach online as well. So there's different school of thoughts on this, and honestly a larger conversation. But for now, what I would say is, you didn't go the school route. I didn't. I took art classes in college and high school and all the things. But I don't have an art degree. I have a business degree.
Right.
So I would say, if you're in the camp of, I'm not going to do art school or can't do art school, whatever your situation may be, at least experiment with different things, and YouTube is free, and give it a good old fashioned try. You don't have to buy high-end stuff to try stuff out. Just
or do
watch
like
few
a
videos
one-time like weekend workshop where like maybe they supply the materials.
or maybe one of those a mixed media workshop. Those are usually fun because you're playing with a lot of different materials in the same class.
Right.
So if you find one of those, I guess that would be my suggestion, and see what falls to you.
And then you can invest in materials to experiment yourself.
Yeah, because a lot of times those classes will be like, we're going to use watercolor, and we're going to use
pastels
and ink and
collage,
water soluble pencils and acrylics and stencils and all the things. At least that's kind of like a taster course,
right?
Give you an idea. Those I would suggest to do in person if possible. I know COVID makes it harder,
right?
But you don't have to buy all the things. Usually, a lot of times they'll have it right there, or they'll tell you exactly what to get, and you get to try these different things out and then go from there. But like we were talking, tying back to it, there is no shortcut. Even once you find the one that is calling to you, you still got to make a move for them.
Right, and I think
not at once.
Yeah,
you still got to make a lot of it before you're not just familiar with it, but then also like comfortable enough to start incorporating more things. Isn't there a saying out there about it takes 10,000 hours to master it?
Yeah, exactly.
That takes a while.
And like I think especially it's interesting from like the art making process, kind of going back to the idea of like having paintings that get like 80% there, and then you hit a block of like what that looks like and what that feels like. Because I mean, I have some paintings I've been like holding on to for like 3 years at this point. It's like, I'm not necessarily the type that like paints over old paintings. I try to like just hold on to them and see where they can evolve into, or maybe that becomes, I thought it was 80% done, but I find, okay, that's actually just the first 20% of like this new style that I can incorporate.
Or vice versa, it's done.
Right. And you're
Sometimes
like, wait a minute.
Like 3 years later, you look at it and you're like, why am I not showing this? This is done.
Right.
And maybe you weren't ready for it, or vice versa. Maybe when you made it,
that was like the one anomaly, and then now work has built up to become that. That's a good point,
exactly, because it's like, in a way, sometimes paintings. So I usually don't paint my paintings over completely either. There's maybe 5 that I've ever like completely painted over, and still I didn't get rid of everything. I used the texture as like a cue to the next thing. But yeah, there are times that you're going to have this painting, it's just sitting there and sitting there and sitting there. It almost acts as a milestone. No, that's not the word I'm looking for. Almost like a time capsule.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Almost like a sketchbook where sometimes you'll do something and years later you go back and look at it and you're like, that's what I'm doing now.
I know.
So maybe it wasn't ready then, and maybe it is just the 20%. But maybe that's what you were aiming for, and you just didn't know how to replicate and make more of it. So it just stood out as a one scene and just stayed behind.
Right.
But now you're bringing it back with your new skills, all the things you've acquired since, all the new knowledge and experience, and now you're evolving it. I don't know. To me, it's really exciting. I'm like, I think that's like, don't throw your old paintings out necessarily unless they're really bad.
Right, and I think that's a super interesting point though, because from like the creative process, like actually making art and the concepts behind it and the technique needed to bring those visions to life, I think I can't remember if we talked like on video or if this was before we recorded yesterday about sketchbooks and the idea of like, it was instilled in me super early on, like from like high school, of like keeping a sketchbook and the active practice of that. And so even in high school, my professor was saying like, you're never going to be able to bring to life every vision that you have, but make sure you document it, especially when it comes to like the words or ideas or concepts behind the work, emotions that you want to express, or like, what do you want to be like known for? Because, and I think that was super helpful to have so early on in my like creative development. Now looking back, heck, 10 years, that was 10 years ago, which is wild. But think like there are like concepts that I was writing back then that like I am still exploring now, which is super interesting to have that as a time capsule, because technically like my skills were not at the point to even know how to translate these ideas or like what that would even look like. And I was so early on and still experimenting or like mimicking other like old master styles to see what I connected with, to then have my own spin and voice on it. And so it's really cool even looking back now, because even the series that I'm now returning back to, the one I made 5 years ago, those originally started, which I didn't realize at the time, I had sketched out a handful of them like my sophomore, junior year of high school.
Wow.
And it was a sketchbook. I kept it at home when I went to college. I didn't even look at it. And when I moved to Raleigh after college graduation, I found these old sketchbooks.
Years later, yeah.
And I was like, this is wild, because I do not remember sketching it. It was 4 years before I had made this series, but it was like there were definitely components that directly translated into this series I had made. So now I'm like almost curious. I should go back in those old sketchbooks and see like what even more so is connecting to what I'm making now.
Yep. It's very interesting, seriously. It's like literally those sketchbooks are like time capsules.
Yeah, and I think that's when you know you're on the right track too.
Yeah.
It's like clearly I connect with this style, this geometric aspect, or like these concepts, because even without thinking about it, I still return back to it. Even when I tried to deviate, everyone's like, yeah, that's very clearly your style, even though like, oh, I feel like that's not uniform, and like all those things that you have as a young artist. Like, I want to make a cohesive series, and people are like, no, it's very obviously you. Like, it's, you don't know anything else besides what you make.
Well, I'm going to say I also have a maybe controversial advice about sketchbooks.
Oh, man.
At least have one that you're not going to show anybody.
Ooh.
Not online, nothing. Don't put that pressure on yourself, because then you start thinking about it needs to look good for when I make that video, for social media. So there's two ways you can, I feel like you can handle this. You
That's
can either do
interesting.
loose sheets, and I do that
Yeah.
a lot of times. I'll buy like a mixed media pad where the sheets come off, and then I curate what goes into a sketchbook. So I can literally can cut and paste it in if I want it to be for show, like for anybody else to see.
Okay.
And or I want to curate, say, a series of like looks, call it like a lookbook, right?
Yeah.
But for your art, where you're like, there's certain marks I like to do, certain colors, certain color mixes.
Almost like a Pinterest board that summarizes your art,
but in a book,
in a physical form.
Yeah, which I want to do that and like have thoughts about my art and things like that. But that's more of a
like, here's a summary of my style and who I am as an artist. In a book.
Exactly.
Right.
So something that they can look back.
That's interesting.
Upon, you know?
Yeah.
So it's something I want to build at some point, because this Exploring Heritage series I keep working on, it's not stopping anytime soon. So I'm like, I might as well document.
That would be a
properly.
great chapter in when you make your like coffee table book of the Heritage series, of like the chapter of like pictures of your sketchbook or like marks and different color swatches on the page.
Oh, that's what I'm thinking.
I can envision it now.
It's gonna be cool. I hope. I don't know. It's on this thing has been on the back burner for months, but it's
the amount of paintings you have in that Heritage series.
Oh, it's enough to fill.
I was gonna say, you could definitely do. You should put that on our vision boards.
Yeah, make it happen.
When should we publish our coffee table retrospective books or
Early
time capsule
2022.
for a series?
Early 2022, first quarter.
All right, we got it. We'll see. Coming 2022. 2022. That's next year.
2022 is not that far.
I know.
We're already third quarter.
I know. That's crazy. I
So
did
that's
have
like that's about 6 months.
I did have on
less.
my, I guess, July. I don't know why. I don't like setting, this is very off topic, but still relevant. Like, I, for some reason, have a hard time setting like annual goals in January. I think because it's like, there's so much of a push to like finish the year strong and all of this stuff. So like, I'm so focused on that. So by the time it comes like January 1, I'm almost in like recovery mindset still. Like, I think it might be the athlete mindset now that I think about it, where it's like, if you're running sprints, you don't like stop at the line. You sprint to the finish line, and it takes a little while to slow down after that. It's like you run all the way through. And so it's almost like through the end of the year, come like second or third week of December, I feel like this conversation of like, what are your New Year's goals going to be? Like, I can't even think about the new year because I'm still pushing. Like, I'm still running through those last 2 weeks. So I find that it's easier for me to set, whether it's after like the first quarter, so like March, or even in July, to set my annual goals almost in July. But as we've talked about in the past, even setting annual goals can be difficult, almost like set them every 3 to 4 months. What do I want to do in 4 months?
Yeah.
But all that being said, I set a goal for like next summer to publish some kind of book.
Yeah.
So maybe this coffee table book is it, or if it's written books, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, okay. So another thought about that. I feel like when we're around this time of the year, September, October type time frame, that's when I start planning roughly in my
January,
head.
February.
Yeah, because I'm like, that's
like
when
3-4 months in advance.
It is, because it's like that way you're almost kind of doing a what worked for me this year type thing. And if you do a quarterly review, which some of you may or may not do,
right?
When you get
or
to
seasonal,
quarter,
if you think more in seasons,
or in seasons, yeah. It's kind of a way for you to recap, okay, what we're like around this time of the year. This is around the time of the year that I look at what I plan for in January.
Yeah.
What I put in writing. So I use January as to put it in writing, but I reevaluate my goals during the year.
Yeah.
Because some things I'm like, in January, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to go all out and pick, these are all the things I want to accomplish, right? But
in the year?
Yes.
Yeah.
But life happens, and some, big goals that we set for ourselves, they may or may not happen, or they're not as important anymore.
Or they happen sooner than you think.
Or that. So around this time of the year, I start thinking kind of like, what's my sprint list? Speaking of sprints.
Oh, yeah.
What do I have in my list that hasn't been done yet, that I've had 9 months to do and I haven't got the chance for, whatever
that
the
is
reason.
still a priority.
That's still a priority. Do I have time to do it in the last 3 months of the year? And if so, where do I fit it? Or does it turn into, I'll reevaluate in January?
Right.
So I don't use January as a, here are all the things I'm going to do, and I'm going to pop them right now, and it's all set. I will set when I want to do them in January, but also with the understanding they're going to move around.
They're going to move, right.
Oh, and or get back burnered forever, and that's fine too. Like, I've come to that acceptance, but
like, it's never going to go as planned.
No. Oh, no. But I'll say the other funny thing and fun thing about doing it is, I feel like January is like good for manifesting in a way without sounding too woo-woo.
Okay.
Basically saying like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to put this thing in writing and I'm going to work towards it. Right. But I don't necessarily look at it again for months. So I just did this a couple days ago and I pulled out my big goals that I had set in January.
I remember the big board.
Yeah, you remember I like do some stuff like in big and then I put it in a little journal, whatever. But I went back and looked at what some of my big ones are, and I was like,
oh my God, that was January?
Check.
That feels like yesterday.
Well, and that's the other thing. So what was different is I did not meet my timelines. I will say that for some of them.
Right.
So there was one about making 20 pieces in a series. Check.
I made 60 pieces this year.
Yeah, I literally wrote make 20 by March. No, I gave myself more time.
I'll say you did like 30 in January. You're 30 series.
Yeah, I know. That's what's crazy. But it's like, I went back and reevaluated because my goal, it was like a studio-facing goal, right?
Yeah.
And my goal was like, I have to make this many paintings in this series, and I want to make at least 20 to show them. You ready for this? I could look this up. You ready? Okay, I'm getting like hairs. I said, to show them October, November. When are we displaying?
Oh my goodness. No way.
Yes way.
October.
I will literally go and show you the page so you see.
That's amazing.
This is insane. This is
insane.
Again, I did this in January. So by not looking at it throughout, I mean, honestly, it probably would have been helpful if I had tacked it up on the side of like the studio wall so I can see like where I'm lined up. But I didn't. So it's like I had several other things on the list. I don't have it in front of me, but honestly,
that's
looking back, I'm like getting like the hairs up. I'm like, some of them I'm still not done. I'm still in the process of where I was like, I'm going to do this in April. Here's September, and I still haven't even started.
Right.
Or some of them I was like, I'm going to do this, at the end of the year, and I've already done them. So it's that balance, but I feel like setting that intention.
You're just like putting it out there. Is I think a huge thing. I think also,
but I feel it's also your brain and your mindset. It's like if a brain is in many ways like a computer and it's always
it remembers.
You're like, this is what we're gonna do. Like end of story. I don't know how, I don't know when, but we're gonna do this.
Right. And
you know, kind of thing. Then it helps you recognize the opportunity when it comes up.
I think that's the biggest thing, especially because like in similar vein I had set for this year, like earlier in the year, I had a huge push of like, I really want to do a mural. And that was like a huge goal of mine. I did not know that I would be moving studios, which was like a huge undertaking. So like that kind of took a back burner. But this summer on like, it was a Facebook group, like a Raleigh artist Facebook group, there was this opportunity for like the Garner Art Around Town opportunity. So yes, it wasn't a permanent mural, but basically they had a bunch of local artists make these 4-foot by 3-foot panels that are now on display in downtown Garner for a few months. And so like, that's a public art display, and like thinking about
they think of it as a mural.
Right. It's like a temporary mural project.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so it's one of those, if I hadn't almost like acknowledged to myself that was even a goal, and that was like so unobtainable, but like that, I definitely would have just like kept scrolling past that post. But because in my mind, I'm like, oh yeah, I did set that at some point this year. And then that popped up, and both Adriana and I participated, and it's like an amazing display. But I wouldn't have been, I think, aware of that opportunity if I hadn't set that intention in January. It's like crazy how it comes up.
So one of mine was to paint like ridiculous big.
Yeah.
It could be a mural or it could be a giant ass painting. I don't care. Like I just want it like huge. Like ridiculous big. Like, can I do this? I want to try the physicality of like having like this giant brush, and I'm just like,
you get a workout in.
Body movement. Oh my god.
Yeah, you'd be sore at the end of the day.
I don't care, but sore and happy. You know? Like, oh, I'm just gonna pass out now. But it was really funny because that was one of my goals. I didn't necessarily write mural. And then you told me about that opportunity for Gardner, which then opened up another opportunity that we're waiting on funding on. But it's a mural as well.
Right, exactly.
And it's
huge. Like that will be, and that's one of those things, especially like, with the timelines of like, okay, even if you don't necessarily start that project this year, but like a lot of these projects, like whether it's murals, whether it's a solo exhibition, even some group exhibitions, like applying for group exhibitions that might not even take place until the end of 2022 or 23 even, to where it's like that process, all those timelines are different. And so it might not be finishing or completing the goal at that point, but it's getting the proposal together, making your pitch, photographing artwork for samples, like getting all that stuff together to get the process moving along. Yeah. Which like, if that wasn't even on your radar, you wouldn't even be thinking about getting the proposal materials together. And now you're better equipped for future opportunities too.
I'm also working on another one. Yeah. Also a mural project. But it was really cool looking back because it's like, you and I talked about it, and we're both like, it would be so cool.
Right.
And it's almost like, you know, we set that intention then, all that excitement, all that energy, all that positivity. We're like, woo! Yeah. And then suddenly, like, these opportunities come up. But again, it's a mindset thing. You're not going to recognize the opportunity when it comes and knocks on your door if you're not aligned with it.
Right.
Now, some things are going to come up, and you're like, man, like, no, no, thank you. Let me pass it on to somebody else, and that is totally fine. But if you're already clear on what you want to do, and we've talked about this before about like defining success and what it means to you. If you've already set what your North Star goals are, and you're like, these are like the main things, and that's where I think January is useful because everybody's in that New Year energy type thing.
Like casting the vision of what's possible.
Exactly.
And what
if you
want.
At least have on a broad level, you don't have to go super detailed, although honestly, I'll go into that in a second.
The more detail, the better sometimes.
Actually, yes, because if you're already trying to reverse engineer what some of the steps are, even if you don't know how, like maybe you're just like Googling some of the aspects of it, of like, okay, say it is an exhibition. Okay, you got to reverse engineer it. If you want an exhibition, how many pieces do you want in it? Ideally, what's your theme? You know, what's your story? Again, you may not know what it looks like yet. Yeah. But you're still working on it. Then you got to work out what kind of venue do you want it in? Is it a gallery? Is it like in a studio building? Is it in a coffee shop? Like, where is it?
building connections to those
Who do
types
you
of
need
places.
to talk to?
Right.
Yeah. How do they open calls? Is it something where you talk to the coffee shop owner,
Right.
or performing center, or whatever it is?
Or do they open calls every 6 months?
Yeah, do they have a form you have to fill out? See what I mean? So it's like,
there's a lot of research that goes into, like, even just by setting that goal, it then tells you those action items afterwards.
and you can break it into smaller, like, size of
right,
bites.
to where it's like, okay, set that goal in January. February, I'm going to go to, like, let's say it's a coffee shop, for example. That's maybe an easier one in terms of approachability. So it's like, okay, I'm going to go to 10 different coffee shops this month, assess, do they have local artwork on display, maybe get a point of contact from them, and like assess, these are like the top 3 I'd want to be in. Then by March, say, okay, I'm going to reach out to all those people and schedule meetings with them. By April, I'm going to make sure this number of pieces are done. And then like maybe by July, have them on display.
Exactly.
So it's like, you can then reverse engineer that larger goal and like set yourself up in the tangible monthly goals.
Exactly. And even if you're like, because it's going to happen, you know, when you're depending on a third party or
Right.
second party, there are chances that they're like, oh no, we're booked for the whole year. What happened?
Right.
Or responsiveness is not great. And you're
Right.
like, please send me this stuff.
Answer me.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So it may happen, but it's the fact that you at least did the legwork for it. It makes it way more possible for that goal to be achieved. Again,
Right.
even if you don't know all the specifics yet, like you said, if you break it into smaller bite-sized goals that feed into the bigger one, then it's not that whole feeling of like, there's this giant goal looming around
Right.
the corner. There's this big mountain, and I don't even know how to get started, and now I'm overwhelmed, and I don't know what to do.
Right.
And now I'm stuck and frozen, and nothing happened. You know,
Yeah.
if you're like, no, I can take this bite. And you look at your giant, never-ending to-do list.
Right.
If you're working
You can
towards
schedule
that
it.
goal, exactly, you can say, okay, how much social media can I cut back on, and or Netflix or whatever you're into?
Yeah.
What can I cut back into a little bit? I need 30 minutes of focus time to work towards this goal.
Right. And that's one thing that I think we talk about a lot in the level of artist membership too.
Yeah.
And what we're focusing on now is like, what are those core components that as a business owner and like a career-minded artist that you need? So like having your CV on hand and updated, having your bio statement, your artist statement, and these core components that will make all goals easier because you're like equipped with the tools so that the project doesn't feel as like
Daunting.
big and daunting to where, okay, you're trying to write about your artwork in the 11th hour of making this application. Whereas like you already have these core pieces where it's just like a plug and play at that point.
Exactly.
Because realistically, there was a quote, it's like one of those super cheesy on the front of like a journal quotes, but like it's true where it's like a goal without a plan is just a dream.
I love that.
To where it's like, unless you schedule it, unless you have an action plan, it's just this, oh, one day I would love to do this dream. But if to make it a goal, you have to schedule it and reverse engineer your goal to make it happen. And I think that's a big shift of like, what is just a hype dream and what is a goal that you are working towards.
I found a different version of that the other day. I may misquote it, but
Yeah.
it was like a business flavored one.
Ooh.
But it was similar to that. And it basically said, a dream with a plan is a business. A business without a plan is a nightmare.
That's a fact.
I was like, what? It was something
That's-
like
yeah.
that. I was just like, this
Interesting.
is freaking, and it's true.
And I
think about it.
yeah.
If a business does not have a plan,
Oh my goodness. And
it's not going to work.
And there's so many businesses like that, especially I'm in this new Launch Raleigh business course right now, which is so amazing. And it's really talking about, okay, do you have a business or do you just have a very expensive hobby?
Exactly.
And I think there's a big distinction between it. And if it is a hobby, that's fine. There are
as
like,
long as it's intentional.
right, if it's intentionally a hobby and you're not like stressing over like, why is this not making me money if that is a goal of yours, then like, okay, but are you treating it like a business? Do you have those components in place? And especially with the level of artist membership, I think that's one of those things. There's so many talented artists out there. Like we know so many amazing artists and people that we follow on Instagram or on Etsy and like all these places, but it's like, do you have those core components to make it a profitable business.
Yeah, you got to treat it like an actual job.
Right. And that's one thing I think, especially with like your background in business and both of our backgrounds in marketing, where it's like they don't teach you that in art school, or if you're a self-taught artist. There's less resources about structuring the art business, which is why I didn't mean to make this like a plug for Level Up Artist membership, but like that's why we found that we realized how important that is.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I love making artwork, but I also need to make money to keep being able to make artwork in order to fuel this hobby.
Yeah. And for me, it turned into, once I came to the realization, this can be a job and this can pay my share of the bills, and I can surpass my previous nice income in corporate America.
Right.
By doing what I love all the time, why wouldn't I give it a good old fashioned try?
Right.
You know, and in my case, I went all in.
Yeah.
But I'm going to have the business systems in place
Right.
to make it happen, because I do want to make money. I know it's possible.
Yeah.
You know, again, and we did have this convo yesterday about separating that aching feeling from it.
Right.
But it's like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Like, if you know it's possible and you absolutely love it, sure, the admin bits are not for everybody. Some people like them, some people don't. And that's okay. I know, I was like,
I love
some of
them.
the admin stuff, which is fine.
I get it from my mom. She's a business, like my parents own their own business. And it's like, my dad's the creative architect. My mom runs the business and the numbers and the marketing. And so like, I get that side from her. Like, I love that side of it.
Yeah. Well, and I did marketing as a major because I did enjoy that very much.
But understanding that's like, if you don't enjoy it as a business owner or an artist, either understand that it's a necessary evil that's needed, or delegate it out to make sure someone else can do it for you.
Yep.
There's like your only options. Not doing it is not an option if you want to become a profitable business.
Exactly. And it's like, think about it. You know, if we go back to our pastry example, why not? If you're on this pastry
we need
shop.
to have pastries next time.
Apparently we're going to have a pastry shop situation in here. Art and pastries. Actually.
New branding coming soon, guys.
No, but seriously, think about it. It's like, okay, if you have someone that has a pastry shop, it's not just one person. Generally, they'll have like, okay, the person up front, the person in the back.
Right.
Like, you may have somebody doing social media. You might have someone doing the cleaning. You may have like
a packaging supplier, a marketing team.
Yeah, so it's like you'll have internal and external partners. Internal partners might be your employees and contractors, and then externals is other people you work with.
Yeah.
So as an artist, think about it this way. You might be like, well, I'm broke. Who am I going to delegate to? Well, it's kind of like, well, once you sell that penny, you need to set some of that money aside.
Right.
We'll
put it
have to have
back
a budgeting
into the business.
talk at some point. Yeah. But you have to reinvest that money at some point. So, for example, an easy one for us to delegate as artists is framing. Do you really want to build your own frames?
Nope.
Most of us, the answer is no. So whether you're buying them or working with a framer that will do them for you, you're already delegating. Photographs, unless you have like a nice setup, good cameras, whatever, your phone can do most of it. But chances are, for some of the submissions that you're going to apply for, you actually need a DSLR or something.
Yeah.
I mean, they ask, or if you're going to print larger items, like make products, or licensing, you're going to need something a little bigger. So at that point, who do you
use?
A photographer.
Right.
Bookkeeping, that's a common one. People will pay an accountant to help them with their taxes for their business. An assistant, a multi-purpose. I need help with all the things. Studio
like keeping track of your art inventory. Which ones are at which gallery? How long are they there for?
When do they come back? And what exhibition? And am I missing stuff? Is it listed on the website?
Yeah.
You know, like you can have people help you out. And you don't have to, building a website. Some people just would rather pay somebody else to do it. Or do their social media. There are a lot of social media folks out there that will do it for you. So it's like identifying, maybe at first, I still think it's important that you do all of it at first, at least to know. It'll make it easier for you to know what to ask for from somebody else when you're asking them. So giving it a try, maybe not necessarily, don't get a DSLR if you don't need to. But you know what I mean? Kind of like get the feel of what the different things are that you need are first, by giving them a try. And then you can decide.
And I think it's
somebody else.
Yeah, I think it's also like understanding, trying everything, just like with the art making process. Like try everything, but then see where your strengths are. So, and it could even be a situation of like, you make an artist connection of like, hey, you have all the photography equipment and I'm good at building websites. Maybe we can do an exchange of like, I'll help you build up these landing pages. And like for the next 3 months, let's get together and photograph artwork together. Like having some type of exchange, even rather than payment, so that you can figure out what your strengths are, what you can offer other people. And then like community over competition mindset is really lifting each other up so that you both win and can both, like, artists are super talented. And I think that's a huge thing that people take for granted when we are artists, is like how versatile and creative our skill set can be applied. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that is literally part of our job. So it's like, I may not know the answer to this, but maybe I know someone that does.
Right.
You know, and we network with each other. You know, even some of the shyest ones that I know will still do some level of networking and exchange resources and exchange ideas. So it's like, you can. Right.
And I think from that standpoint, it's like, it's an awareness of where your strengths and weaknesses lie, which as like a coping mechanism, a lot of the time we can kind of just not face it at all. Because yes, in order to figure out your strengths, you have to admit where your weaknesses are, which is very difficult for some people to do. But I think it's more empowering to know that, so that you know where you can delegate out or where you need to ask for help. Because ultimately, building a business is back to make it so you have more time and resources to make your artwork. And that's ultimately what we're all trying to do as emerging artists. Like, what can we build in order to give us more time to make the work that we enjoy making? And like, all of us do it for the process, right? Like we talked about in our last video of, once you make the piece, like the process is yours, the art making process is yours. But then once the piece is complete,
you have to find who it belongs
to. Who it belongs to. It's like, I was explaining to a friend the other day, to where we were talking about like mental health and therapy. And I was like, honestly, I've seen a therapist in the past and I don't actively see one now, but I was like, I feel like right now in my life, art is my therapy. It isn't necessarily this like peaceful, relaxing process. Typically I get very like in my own thoughts and it becomes heavy.
It's very internal.
It's very internal, unpacking ideas, concepts, life experiences. And I do that through my art, to where then he was like, wait a minute. So you treat your art making process like therapy and then you sell your artwork. Yep. She's like, are you getting paid to go to therapy is basically how you think of it? I'm like, kind of.
I've never thought of it that way.
Maybe we found a loophole as artists. So like, we use this process to better get to know ourselves and then sharing that with the world. But
But there's a dark side to that though.
Right.
Like,
and I think it's
someone that needs, we'll just throw it out there. Obviously we're not health professionals.
Right.
But if it depends what you're going through as well. Right. Through a therapist that might be more guided. Right. And through the art, you can go really dark, down dark path and not know how to get back. So there is that.
True.
There is
health professionals are very valuable.
Yes, they are.
And I think it's one of those
and there's art therapists out there too, which are really
true.
It's really cool.
Where it's like where I am, it's just simply not a specific trauma per se or anything super heavy that I have to work through, but it's more just like getting a deeper understanding of who I am, or like patterns that I recognize with my personality. It's nothing that needs a professional help. But
on a surface level, we could just say it's a de-stressor.
Right.
We all suffer different kinds of stresses in our life, whether it's like a traffic jam or a boss that, oh my goodness, please you know, whatever the case may be. So I'm like, worst case scenario, we can treat it as basically like our respite, our sanctuary. Like, this is our safe space.
Right.
We can work out those feelings and thoughts and things like that.
And the product becomes something beautiful.
It does. And something people connect to. Actually, even if it isn't beautiful, sometimes they'll connect to it anyway.
Even more so when it's
which is crazy when somebody looks at something like an abstract and they identify what you were thinking without even seeing a title, nothing. Like, you have no idea what it's about. And they're like, oh, that reminds me of a time, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, get out of my head.
Did you read my sketchbook? What are you doing?
Yeah, like, do you watch everything I do?
And that's when you know it's like, that's the right collector for that piece. Like when they click and they get it
at that point.
Right. Which I think is also interesting, because when I was talking to my friend, they were like asking about concepts behind my work. And I hesitate before really releasing that to a lot of people because, and I think a lot of artists are that way, that have that mindset of the piece belongs to the person that's meant to own it, because they bring their own life experiences to it. They bring their own emotions and stories, and like their relationship with the piece is maybe completely different than your original intention, but it doesn't make it any less valid. And I think that's where that conversation of people like, oh, I just don't get art, I don't understand it. But like, there's nothing necessarily to get, quote unquote, but it's whatever you receive from a piece, that experience and the emotion that you have, that's everyone's interpretation is valid. Like if you don't connect with it, you're not supposed to. And I think that's what's cool about like where we have our studios at Art Space. There's like over 30 different artists here. And so we used to come here all the time, even like before we had studios here, because because you could go down the hallway and it's like a sculptor and then a jewelry maker and then an oil painter and then like an acrylic painter and then a hyper-realism. And it's cool being able to see so many different skill sets and styles in one space.
And you're not going to connect with all of them.
Right. You're not going to connect with all of them. And that's why I loved bringing friends here, because it's like, all right, everyone's bound to like at least one person. And you kind of scatter and be like, oh, did you see that person down the hall? Or no, but did you see that person upstairs? And like everyone's going to come away with at least one style they connect with, which I think is what's so cool about the art making process, is like there is room for everyone, like community over competition. Everyone has their own voice as an artist and everyone has their own style that other people are going to connect with.
Exactly. And it's like, it also turns into, let's say we go for a landscape artist, our interpretation of it is going to be different. The story side to them could be different. We could even use the same color palette, same medium, same sizes.
It'd be so different.
A lot of it could be the same. Even if our styles were very similar, which obviously they're not, it's just an example, people are going to connect to it differently. They may connect with you as a person and or with your artwork at a level that if they connect with you, they may not connect with me, and vice versa. There may be someone that connects with me that doesn't connect with you, even though in our hypothetical example, we're doing something almost the same.
Right, exactly.
So it's like, that's the part where when some artists are like, I don't want to share my secrets and this and that, like they're very guarded. And I know. We've met them and it's fun. You know, you share what
I'm like, I'm just asking what brand of paint you use, like, or what type of tape you use to make this geometric line. I'm like, look, I've been working on this technique for 6 years and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, right.
Exactly.
Good luck with that. See you later.
I know. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, you know what? Even if I tried to replicate exactly what you did, and I'm not, I mean, I know there are professional art copyists out there. That's a whole different ballpark. But for 99.99999% of everybody else you're going to meet, they can't replicate what you do.
Right.
So who cares, you know? Like,
and I think that's a cool part of it. Share it. Like the artist is so much of the process. Yeah. And like by putting our emotions through it, and like that art making process is seen in the end piece or felt in the end piece. Exactly. Which is what makes it unique to that artist. Exactly. Which I think, especially as like a brand or as an art business, why incorporating your ideas and who you are and your stories are so important to it, because it's not some mass-produced print at Target. Like, what is the difference between that for $40 and your original piece of artwork? Like, there is those stories and that emotion and that process, and that's what people invest in and they feel connected to. Exactly. It's so fun.
Yeah, we'll have to have a longer conversation on decorative versus like meaningful connection. Yeah, it's definitely of like mass produced.
All that fun stuff. But with that, we should probably both go start painting. So
we need to wrap this up.
Speaking of art, too long enough. Speaking of art making process, we both need to go paint. But thank you guys for listening in to today's episode of the Art Studio Insights podcast. We have new episodes released every Tuesday. And if you want to follow us in between episodes, you can reach out to us on social media. I am at J Sanders Studio across all platforms.
And at May Art across all platforms. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
See ya! Bye!